acronyms, but some of you may not know those acronyms. So, at any point, please speak up. Obviously, you know the SCEP acronym. CSEP stands for the Collaboratory for the Study of Earthquake Predictability. Few of us can remember that, so we'll just call it CSEP. And another acronym I'd like you to know about is RISE. And RISE is a big European project that is a 3-4 year project. It's funding a lot of activity in Europe around earthquake forecasting, but also time-dependent seismic hazard and risk assessment, and is funding some of the people that are here today. So just for those of you who haven't really interacted much with CSEP, and I know many of you have, but for those of you who haven't, CSEP's goals are to accelerate rigorous research into the predictability of earthquakes, especially via prospective testing, so before the earthquakes have occurred, which enables us to make objective statements about the skill of forecasting methods and prediction algorithms. And it's really to galvanize the community around sort of common tools, concepts, and methods. And, here we are sitting together doing that. So that's great. Just a little bit of CSEP background. Whoops. So this initiated as a SCEP special project with a generous grant from the Keck Foundation that Tom Jordan, who's in the audience, pulled in. With this grant, CSEP started the first ever prospective community forecast experiment in California that initiated in 2006. That's the so-called REALM experiment that's been discussed and published on, et cetera, many times. So there's sort of 2 phases of the CSEP sort of operations here at SCEP and elsewhere. The first phase ran for about 10 years, and it consisted of 4 so-called testing centers that comprise a bunch of computers and some software and some automated routines for generating earthquake forecasts and evaluating those forecasts with incoming data. And those testing centers were based at SCEP here and at the ERI in Tokyo, GNS Science in New Zealand, and ETH in Zurich. And there were 7 testing regions, which included some of these places here. And we had over 400 models, or more precisely model versions, that were running in these kinds of competitions. That first phase of CSEP generated lots of papers, lots of outputs, et cetera, that we won't talk about here today. But we felt that sort of the software design and the way things were run at CSEP needed an overhaul. So a few years ago here at SCEP, we designed sort of a second phase of the CSEP. And I'm very pleased to say that, looking back at that presentation, a lot of the things that we were hoping to do, we did. So it's very pleasing, sometimes nice to have that gap of sort of 2 to 3 years where you can actually do something. So I'm excited about sharing with you some of the activities. So we've changed our focus towards really open science, open source, community-based code development. And Bill Savin, the SCEP software developer, will be talking about this Python toolkit PyCSEP in more detail. We aim to publish all of our papers now, including a reproducibility package, which means that anyone can download the code, forecasts, and data that are needed to reproduce all of the results and figures in the papers that we publish. So all the forecasts that are now published are openly available on Zenodo. The code is openly available to reproduce all of those figures and all of that. So, I think this is having a big impact already because it's reaching, people that previously would have had to interact with, the testing centers to try and get code and data and forecasts. So I think there's a big step towards sort of a much more open environment. And just a little bit about operations. Bill Savin is the dedicated software developer at SCEP. We have bi-weekly developers teleconference calls with people around the world. And of course, we have workshops, seminars, et cetera, that are sponsored by SCEP and RISE and other entities. So just a word about RISE here. Again, this is a big €8 million project funded by the European Union. It's sponsoring a number of activities and people. So at the moment, it's a very exciting period in within CSEP activities because there's so much happening sort of multiple countries around the world. This is just their website. You know, take a look. It's really trying to integrate sort of the time-dependent earthquake forecasting problem with time-dependent earthquake risk and loss assessment. And you know, you can see the publications here. You can see the last news item was, you know, the CSEP toolkit that you know, here was developed by by Bill Savin and the RISE Work Package 7 testing group, etc. So, you know, take a look at that website if you want more details. So just to give you a brief flavor of some of the activities that we've engaged in over the last few years. Again, CSEP, this Python toolkit, has been a major activity, and I'm very pleased to say that the code base has been reviewed by some of the people in this audience, I think, and Michael Burrell from the USGS in an open and transparent way in the Journal of the Open Source Software, so JOSS. So that was published earlier this year. And we've just published in the Seismological Research Letter, again, an overview of CSEP capabilities along with a tutorial and again, a reproducibility package. So, you know, feel free to check that out. I'm getting some signs from Bill who's nervous about time. Is that right? 6 minutes, okay. And we've made lots of methodological advances, mostly in terms of the open science ideas, but also in terms of evaluation metrics, ensemble modeling, multi-resolution grids, grid-free modeling and testing, et cetera, et cetera. So you'll hear more about that. And just to give you some idea of the evaluations that CSEP has undertaken over the last few years, there's a paper on prospective testing in California that was published earlier this year. Italy, Pablo Iturrieta will talk more about that later in the session. Global testing, again, a paper by Bayona and others, and a couple of papers in prep by Asim and others. There's a talk by Tonio later about a comparison between regional forecasting and global models. We tested USURF3 ETAS and Coulomb rate and state models during the Ridgecrest and the Amatrice Norcia sequences. Again, some papers associated with that. There's a prospective test of the seismic gap hypothesis in Mexico that's in review in BSSA, led by Alan Husker. And Rick Schoenberg and others have been working on evaluating one-day forecast in California. And again, this is just sort of the things that I'm keeping track of. There's additional activities that we can talk about more. So here's just sort of to just show off a little bit the papers that have come out over the last few years. Again, there's sort of the 2 CSEP papers, a bunch of others published. There's 3 more in review and, you know, 4 more in preparation that I'm sort of keeping track of, but I know there's more. So there's a lot of activity at the moment, and it's very exciting. So why are we here? Well, largely to re-engage, right? We haven't seen each other in 3 years. There's a lot of new people, a lot of new faces. There's a lot of early career scientists that are coming into the community. So there's lots of breaks. We've got half an hour breaks for coffee. We have over an hour for lunch. You know, get together, chat, brainstorm, get to know each other. You know, seek out the early careers, and the early careers should, you know, find the elder, wiser scientists. You know, connect and brainstorm. Of course, we'd like some feedback on what CSEP's been up to. We'd obviously like you to use and help us develop CSEP further. It's really a community-based software development project, so we're hoping to recruit more people into this. We'd like to get your input to shape CSEP priorities over the next few years. And in particular, SCEC is currently in a transition phase. We have funding during a so-called bridge period, and that's about 1.5 years or so. And then, of course, we're hoping for the statewide California Earthquake Center to be funded, which would be a major program again, and that would allow us to do sort of 5 years of science. So sort of thinking about 2 timescales here. One is sort of the 1.5 year timescale. You know, what else can we do? How can we increase the impact? How can we disseminate our products more? And how do we kickstart activities now that would allow us to, you know, develop major activities during the hopefully the next SCEP. A major component today, I hope, will be figuring out CSEP's role in testing forecasts that are developed with machine learning techniques. And what can we, as a community, do to try and help machine learning folks get into this problem? How do we translate, the sort of the ROC statistics, the ROC statistics, into likelihood scores that we care and love? And how do we come up with maybe community benchmark problems and data sets that would help us get together and be able to do meaningful comparisons between your latest ETAS model and some machine learning method, right? That I think CSEP can play a major role in facilitating that interaction. And we'd like to figure out the next steps for testing operational earthquake forecasts, including USGS products and others. We've done some work, and we've got some exciting presentations by Nicholas and Gabe, who'll be showing their results. And I'm hoping for some more discussion around how CSEP can get more involved. So here's an overview of the agenda. So we've got 3 sessions, well, plus sort of a group breakout session. So this first session that's about to start is really about the CSEP status and some highlights. We've got some discussion here at the end where we again would like your feedback. The session following that is focusing on earthquake forecasting with machine learning. And you'll notice that the program that's been printed out is a little outdated. If you go online, you'll see the up-to-date agenda, which features Kellyan, who'll talk about his method for machine learning-based earthquake forecasting, and Sam. In fact, we're going to switch the order around because Kellyan's got some good discussion points. We'll have lunch between 1 and 2, but I suspect we'll start lunch a little bit earlier. Then in the afternoon, we'll have a session that's focused on operational earthquake forecasting. And in the last session, I'd like you to get together in groups and work on specific problems and help us get some recommendations for next steps. We'll hopefully finish before 5. And at some point, I'm going to take a poll for who's interested in joining the other workshop tonight for dinner at a Mexican place. Those of us who are coming from Europe have been starved of Mexican food, so I can't wait to do that. So have a think about whether you want to join us. It's walking distance, and I'll take a poll and we'll get the numbers to Anne-Marie, who's organized that. So again, thank you all very much for coming. This is an informal workshop. Please interject, ask questions. Again, we have a few folks online. So at this point, are there any questions you have for us? Okay. Oh yeah, I should mention that we have a, first of all, this is being recorded. We hope to post the presentation slides later on if we get permission from the speakers. There's a microphone for the audience, which is this catch box that you can throw around. So please use that when you ask questions. And Fred, do you see any questions there from our online folks? No? Okay. All right. Well, if there are no further questions, then I'll ask Bill to start his presentation.